This is JadeCast, your gateway to traditional martial arts and Chinese culture. Brought to you by your host, Shifu Jonathan Bluestein. Welcome back to JadeCast, and today we have with us Tomehr Ben-Johanan, a serious practitioner and a veteran one, a colleague of mine who is teaching Chinese martial arts here in Israel. Tomehr, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jonathan. Good to talk to you too. It's been a while.
Yeah, certainly. We haven't spoken in a few years. So
Yeah.
Tomehr is a well-known guy in the Chinese martial arts circles here in Israel, and he's also a disciple of Shifu Tomehr, and he's got a lot going on. You know, he's been around, seen a lot of styles, and really, Tomehr, perhaps you could tell us a little bit of what got you started in the martial arts and what were the original styles you worked with.
Okay, so I began at age 5 doing Japanese karate,
Okay,
which was the only thing in town back then. And I basically continued with that until I was 18. And then, as you know, we have mandatory military service. And I remember I got some photocopies from my sensei of these old karate books, so I could continue my studies in the military. And I tried, but it was a mess. It was never going to work. Yeah, so that was basically my military service was the end of my karate training.
What did you do throughout your service?
Um, I was, I guess, an equivalent of an American grunt. I was in the paratroopers. Yeah, and then leaving the paratroopers, I kind of lingered on in military circles. A bit of training in a counter-terrorist unit called the Yamam, and after that, I moved to the States and did a bit of service in the U.S. Military as well. Also in an infantry role.
Yeah, I actually wasn't aware you were with the U.S. infantry. Which division?
So it's the 1st Infantry Division. Just a brief service, mostly besides the Israeli military. Most of my experience is just training, military training. So I got to taste different military hand-to-hand systems. I guess that's a big takeaway for me as a martial arts nerd. You know, then it's always interesting to see what it is they try to teach infantry soldiers, and whatever short amount of time they have, people with absolutely no background, and there's this idea as if perhaps they might even need to use these skills in combat, which obviously they don't. So they put a lot of effort, a lot of thought into preparing troops for hand-to-hand combat. You know.
So, which system in particular did you study with the 1st Division? Was it MICMAP?
It's called the Modern Army Combatives. Yeah, MAC. Which is, I guess, very much an MMA derivative, with still a bit of the old pugilistic training, like with a bayonet. You know, they still use bayonets in the U.S. We don't do that here in Israel. And a bit of boxing, but that was actually my first real glimpse of BJJ. You know, I didn't know much. There's also there's a culture of wrestling in the U.S., I guess in many places in the world that we don't really share, in our country. We don't have that.
Yeah, so
And
for listeners who are not familiar, here in Israel, we don't have anything equivalent to collegiate wrestling and this whole competitive atmosphere that people have in U.S. high schools and colleges. It's just almost non-existent in this country.
I mean, let's be honest, we just don't have much sports at all. I mean, we have a bit, but it's not the same thing. It's not ingrained in the culture like in I don't know, in Central Asia, Europe, and the
Mhm.
US. It's just not part of what we do. Yeah. So I got to see wrestlers and American football players joining the army. Big guys. Who gets big like that in Israel? No one gets that big, you know.
We don't have that kind of food.
Boxers. We don't have that kind of food. I don't know. We're missing something. No one knows how to box. I mean, properly box here, right? I mean, it's just not so. So the people with a bit of background in that respect, and I guess mostly the people building these programs for the military, a giant military, right? It's not the same scale, and these are people from combat sports, you know.
Mhm. I would say let's be fair towards our combat athletes here in Israel because yes, the boxing scene is rather small and there aren't a lot of skilled people in it, but there are nonetheless. I mean, we do have a Hagar Finer who's a consecutive world champion. I think she's flyweight, and we also have Ran Nakash who competed internationally and did well for himself for a short period of time. And also, I think about two or three Israeli notable MMA fighters who also did pretty well. Yeah, but overall, Tomer is right. Jews are not notorious for their um, athletic abilities, let's just say that. Over the centuries, this has not been a notable feature of Jewish culture.
I'd say that mostly. I mean, 200 years ago, go visit somewhere in Central Asia, and yeah, the Jews are probably wrestling with everyone else.
You think?
Same,
Interesting.
same in I don't know where, Eastern Europe. I think, but it's just we kind of invented everything here pretty fast, and that we did that wasn't part of the plan, you know. So that's not what they do in schools in Israel, yeah,
Yeah,
or
well,
colleges.
let's just go back for a second here. So you start age 5. How old are you now?
I'm 44.
So that's 39 years on and off in the martial arts. That's quite a long time.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how on and off it is. I mean, it's just part of who I am, you know.
Hmm.
I moved on at some point to Chinese martial arts where I've been since 2006.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So let's get talking about Chinese martial arts at the moment. I would just firstly would like to ask you, how would you compare the different combative systems you saw first in the IDF, then with the Israeli Amam, which is actually, would you say that's the equivalent of the American SWAT teams?
Um, well, I'd say that they fulfill that role. Israel is a very small country, so we only need one SWAT team for the entire country, really. Uh, so that makes it that changes the way things work a bit. It's more centralized,
Hmm.
much higher level. I'd assume. I mean, no disrespect to any county SWAT team anywhere in the U.S., but this is a high level special forces unit. Too high level, for me. I didn't. Eventually, I didn't make the entire training. I lasted until the last week or two. Again, just happy to take away whatever Krav Maga they do there and in martial arts.
I mean
Yeah.
that's respectable that you even got in. They take the cream of the crop. All the people who've been typically in special forces in the IDF
Oh yeah,
already.
I was lucky. Yeah, I that was a great achievement for me to get kicked out that late. Yeah, definitely.
So going back on the question, so between the Krav Maga that you saw with regular IDF infantry and the stuff you saw with the Yamam, and then what you saw with the first division? You know, what would be the similarities, the differences?
Straight infantry Krav Maga in the IDF is pretty institutionalized. This is the kind of thing that boards of Krav Maga experts sit around and plan and test over decades. So it's just one thing. You know, it doesn't matter exactly what unit you serve in. For the most part, it doesn't matter. For the most part, you'll be doing the same curriculum, which is how to beat someone to death with an assault rifle. That's that's basically infantry Krav Maga. And to the degree that it's even needed for an infantry soldier, I guess that's a good approach, you know?
Yeah, emphasis is on extreme aggression, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting side of Krav Maga compared to other martial arts, including perhaps other military combative systems, is the emphasis on sheer aggression and in a pretty well developed way. So this is part of the general IDF ethos. When you see like screening programs for special forces units, they test the same attributes that are developed in Krav Maga, in military Krav Maga training. I'll just give a brief example, so to make it a bit more more understandable. I've participated in these drills. You can have like some central tree or any item on the ground. You take a squad of soldiers and have them rotate around that tree crawling, but in different directions. Half of the soldiers crawling in one direction, half the soldiers crawling in the other direction, crawling in circles around, let's just say, a tree. Okay? They just give that command and sit around and watch. And what inevitably happens, because crawling isn't much fun, you want to crawl as little as possible. Everyone wants to crawl real close to that tree and not like 10, 20 feet away. So you have all these people bunched up around the tree, crawling in opposite directions, smashing into each other, right? And they just want to keep moving. They don't care about it. They're just trying to do what they're told and expend as little energy as possible because they haven't slept in 3 days and they're being abused and they just want to get it over with, right? And the only thing that interests the instructors testing the soldiers is when both people try to crawl past each other, who's on the top and who's on the bottom. Because one person's got to crawl over the other. Okay, so this is an example of a screening test. There are many tests with the same bottom line used to screen for example, infantry special units, you know? And this is the same mindset that goes into military Krav Maga training. Only there, instead of just testing, they're actually building these attributes, trying to bring out this aggression, single-mindedness, with you know, and for good reason. If you have very little time to train a soldier, then technique is a bit of a long shot. You know, it's like they say in combat sports, low percentage technique. Well, when you have a short enough period of time to train people, every technique becomes a low percentage technique. So what's the brass tacks? What's the bottom line? What's the first thing? You know, let's just make him not a wimp to begin with, you know, and they'll figure it out or not. So that's the approach. That's military Krav Maga. A lot of that bleeds over to civilian Krav Maga, at least in Israel. I don't know much about the civilian Krav Maga scene overseas. It is more technical. It's more like a martial arts class, and less just people trying to wade through crowds and get the crap beat out of them and stuff like that. But there's still a lot of that, I think, compared to other martial arts, right? So that's military Krav Maga. In the Yamam, and there's just a lot more of it. That was just training it on a, what you could say, on a professional level, many times a week. Actually getting in shape purposefully, and not just as a side effect of being corporally punished, or I don't know. But people are actually trying to get good at this stuff. And of course, a much higher chance of actually needing to use something, at least that aggression side of the training, because no one uses this stuff in modern infantry combat ever. No one uses any of this stuff.
And we should say they don't avoid using it because they don't believe in it. They don't use it because the scenarios just don't come up so frequently. You don't.
Yeah, because we invented like guns, and we have guns that can kill people really up close, and if you miss, you can shoot again, and it just I think it's important to mention also people that are into this kind of training, that it only came about together with these super guns that we use today, because when people had muskets and bayonets, they didn't have separate martial arts training, because fighting was martial arts. It was running up with basically a short, heavy, terrible spear, and it's just martial arts. But once that disappeared, I think it was. I think people got frightened. So what's going to happen? So our soldiers are just going to be wiggling their fingers through war. We want them to be real men, we want them to be tough. Maybe teach them boxing or savat or whatever, but it's not. It wasn't born out of necessity, like I think a lot of people like to believe or make other people believe.
I think that would be just more comprehensible for listeners if they conceive of the type of terrain that Israeli soldiers fight in. So, for instance, the desert, or shallow mountainous rocky terrain, or a cityscape, but whilst being escorted by jeeps and tanks and airplanes and such. With these sorts of conditions, you don't typically get jumped on by someone whom you couldn't see. It's not as common. And if you don't happen to see something, that's usually a bomb that was hidden somewhere. That's not a person. It's unlike what the American people have perhaps in their minds, having grown up with the whole Vietnam narrative, the jungle, and that sort of situation is one in which people are hiding behind the bushes and such. That's not a common occurrence in Israel at all. A very different type of warfare.
I see the point you're making, but first of all, you can always have extreme close range combat, right? I mean, that is something that exists, especially where there's civilian population, and that's kind of where combat has been going the past few decades. But even if you're clearing a building, I agree, that brings up the chance, the probability of someone actually jumping you in a way in which you can't shoot them and they can't shoot you. But that's pretty rare. One of you will be able to shoot the other guy probably, and will do that too. It's to the degree that I don't believe it's worth 2 weeks of training. It's just not worth it. I think it's an ethos which may be important, but not in practical terms. I don't see it.
Do you think the infantrymen would be better equipped if they had knives? Because the IDF doesn't actually issue knives for regular infantry.
Um, no, I think they're just fine. I think having an assault rifle is a pretty deadly weapon, that can shoot point blank. And let us not forget that the biggest asset is having a few friends around you, which if they're not there, nothing will save you, no matter what the range is or what the weapons are or whatever. That
Mhm.
it's not really. I don't know, I saw that series with the Punisher series. That was
Yeah,
great
yeah, it's
on
awesome.
Netflix, right?
Hmm.
So he has all these flashbacks from, I don't know, the Middle East or Afghanistan or whatever it is. And there's one part where he's like wading through this building and shooting people that jump him from every side. He also has this like sawed-off shotgun on him. He's using two, and there are lots of weapons, lots of clashes, hand to hand. Um, yeah, no, it's just a bunch of guys. Yeah, they're not that great trained, maybe not as well trained as the Punisher is. Not as well armed, though. I'm not sure that really is much of a help having like more guns on you, like in a video game. And yeah, they lay down a lot of firepower, and that's it. And it doesn't matter really. It could be a SWAT team. Yeah, there's a bit more probability of actually needing to touch someone physically, but it's not going to be martial arts. Just someone's going to shoot him pretty fast or something. No one's punching anybody. No one's kicking anybody.
Yeah, I think the
Uh,
equivalent might be historically, say uh, people often talk about why hasn't ground grappling developed further in traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu and Koryu jiu-jitsu. A lot of people say, well, in olden times, on the battlefield, if you've fallen down, it's only a matter of time. If you stay on the ground, someone's gonna stab you. You might grapple with someone, but his friend's gonna stab you. Somebody's gonna try to stab someone else. So you can't actually remain on the ground on the battlefield for too long, for the most part. And it's sort of the same scenario, right? You're saying, yeah, well, I can't stay in the situation anyway.
yeah, absolutely. I think that the ground grappling, like we see in MMA or in sports grappling recent years, stemmed out of the same place that a lot of these martial arts, empty hand martial arts, have, which is duels, basically. Yeah.
So you're saying earlier that the first division martial arts, the army martial arts in the United States, you felt were heavily influenced by BJJ and MMA, and just this moment you're saying, oh, perhaps this is not as suitable for modern combat. So
It's
would
a
you?
yeah, it's the same thing. Like, so what's Krav Maga? It's boxing. These days, it's more Muay Thai as well. It's bits and pieces of like Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, all kinds of like European stick arts. I don't know, stuff I don't really know much about. Maybe a bit of wrestling that disappeared pretty fast once they had to teach people who didn't know how to wrestle. And yeah, it's basically martial arts, combat sports, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing. You're right with modern army combatives. It's combat sports.
So
Yeah.
what was your take on it? So you studied a little bit, and what was your impression? Did that resonate with your service with the IDF? Did you feel it would have had any use?
Um, so there were a few times I served in southern Lebanon. Um, listen, we're a politically charged country, especially everything that has to do with the military. I don't mean here to say anything politically charged. This is just my biography. I didn't mean for it to be my biography. It's just where I was born and where I was sent and what I did. But that's what I did. I was in southern Lebanon in the late 90s. And I guess that's where I had the most actual physical contact with people. And, they were mostly more like civilians than like combatants. I mean, they wanted me dead, and they did what they could to try to get me there, but they were just civilians. And no martial arts could have helped me deal with these people. What I needed was either some way to enlist them to my side or to more likely intimidate them. Yeah, that's that's so no, none of this stuff really had any application to my service. And I had extensive service. I served for 20 years in the reserves. But this is just not what soldiers do. It's not what soldiers do.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So let's transition to Chinese martial arts. So in 2006, you said you make that transition. What prompted you to look into Chinese martial arts? It's usually the other way around. There are a lot of people who become disappointed or, in their view, disillusioned with Chinese martial arts in terms of their combative propensity due to either misunderstandings or perhaps they really weren't taught how to use them or they didn't attend the school where it's taught. And then they find themselves, going to BJJ or MMA or Muay Thai and then bitterly looking back and feeling some measure of angst that they didn't get what they wanted from the Chinese arts. And so they moved into other styles to look for that combative aspect. And then you actually made it the other way around in reverse to what happens with a lot of people. So I do wonder what brought you from the world of military training into this very traditional mindset.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not sure, but thinking about it now, I think a lot of people who do transition the other way around actually believe in some degree of real life application for learning how to fist fight, and I just don't really see it. I don't spend too much time fist fighting with people, so I know a lot of the stuff I learned previously is considered like very effective in the street or what have, but yeah, I don't think I ever really saw it that way, so I wasn't really looking for that. To me, it's just really interesting. I love the stuff. In 2006, I had a friend who wanted to start martial arts for the first time, and he's never done anything physical. I mean, the guy would just sit on the couch always his entire life. And he told me, I want to start martial arts. And we were talking about it. And he said, listen, I heard that Tai Chi or Aikido are pretty like low key, don't sweat too much. And I knew absolutely nothing about either of those arts. And I said, hey, great, let's go try out some free, that all the instructors offer free lessons because they're desperate for new students. Let's go do some free lessons with some instructors. And I had a friend in high school, used to do, I guess he still does, do a Honggao, like a Hong Kong lineage. And his dad is a Tai Chi instructor. So one of our free lessons was going to his dad's Tai Chi class, and there I just saw crazy shit that I've never seen before. As a martial arts nerd, it was amazing. The hand skills, um, just I just couldn't move like that, you know, watching them do push hands and later touching them, you know, having these old ladies who in retrospect weren't very good at Tai Chi pushing me around, and I was way bigger and stronger and more like macho, and I thought that was amazing. Like they really got something there, you know. So I wasn't of the mindset of, oh, well, so you can do that to me and I can't do it to you, but I can just beat you up some other way. No, I was like, wow, that's amazing. I want to know how to do that. Why can't I? I've never seen that before, you know? So that's it. So I joined class, eventually became, did the Baisher with instructor, with Dov Weisberger. Who I'm still very much in touch with, and yeah, and I really went deep into that Tai Chi system, practical Tai Chi Chuan with through Dan Doherty's lineage, Shenting Hung from Hong Kong.
Mhm. So I would assume that some of the listeners may be a tad confused or perplexed given those fantastic descriptions you were talking about, recalling the time when you first came to Shifu Weisberger's class. Because people often have the idea of Tai Chi, you know, Tai Chi Chuan, being this very slow and gentle YMCA practice for the elderly. And then you happen to come upon a school and a lineage which hold a somewhat different, perhaps more traditional approach to the practice of the art. So could you tell us a little bit about that school and lineage?
Yeah, so I'll say that yeah, most Tai Chi is kind of how you just described it. Um, Old people moving slowly. Um, and that is also original Tai Chi practice methods. That I mean that is Tai Chi, or at least it's part of Tai Chi. The reason being that like kind of like shadow boxing, if you're a boxer, or what people usually associate with the idea of kung fu forms or karate, kata. Um, some martial arts are just really obsessed with detail and are kind of weary about moving too fast and missing stuff. So they move slowly. That's just why Tai Chi people move slowly. Um, and um, and yeah, it's an interesting story about this specific lineage, why it did remain more combative, maybe even become more combative than most Tai Chi we see today. So I think first it's important to say that Tai Chi, at least at one point, I'd say, I don't know, in the 70s and the 80s, it was really popular. It may have been the most popular martial art on earth, maybe. I mean, I don't know, but you had like fucking billion Chinese doing it every morning. Oh, that's a lot of people, a
Mhm.
lot of people doing it. They carry these practices outside of the mainland to ethnic Han communities outside of the mainland. They were also practicing. You know, it was a fad. It was a big Chinese fad. Um, and this happened in Hong Kong, but in Hong Kong, um, it made a different martial culture because Tai Chi was popularized at the wake of kind of outlawing public practice of Chinese martial arts in the mainland. That didn't really happen in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, um, there were traditional arts practiced in secret, and the triads were big, like Chinese organized crime, and that had their secret kung fu styles, and kung fu was always very secretive. So this was maybe the biggest break, bringing Tai Chi out the way it was, institutionalizing it the way that they have. It was making it public, was making Chinese martial arts public. When you have these arts being secret and then bringing them out in public, there's something, it's like farting in public. It's like, it's not appropriate. It challenges etiquette, etiquette. Like it's not, it's just not right. And when the people you're pissing off are, organized crime associations in a pretty hectic area in Hong Kong, then there was a lot of violence involved, and the style of Tai Chi that I learned is a product of that violence. It stems from a lineage of Tai Chi that existed in Hong Kong before the big Tai Chi fad was exported to there from the mainland. Basically a Wu style of Tai Chi, which was practiced in secret, just like all these other Southern Hakka styles that were popular, Wing Chun, all these styles that were practiced secretly. So the founder of the style, Chen Tinghong, was in a strange place. On the one hand, he learned his Tai Chi secretly, like a lot of other local martial artists. And on the other hand, the style he learned was closely related to the Tai Chi that was kind of bastardized and had this simplified form practiced in the parks in public every morning. So he's kind of caught in between these two phenomena,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we're just to go back to something you stated, which I think is true, but then perhaps only partially, the statement that martial arts were outlawed in mainland China. I think based on my research, it's not that they were strictly outlawed, but that you couldn't do anything combative in public. So you could practice forms, weapons. Yeah, well, that would depend, I guess. Staves, but knives and swords and such for a while. It's not like they were actively persecuted, but you might, people from the people who work for the party might take issue, and nobody wants to have these people take issue with them because you could just disappear.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean the cultural context should be given to listeners that historically there are a lot of martial arts associations that rose up in China. These just started as small schools, became broad organizations, and often military cults or full-blown military forces. And these groups and organizations and small militias tended to challenge the mainstream narrative of their generation and offer the imperial regime. People had a lot of reasons why they would support such organizations or be recruited into them and oppose the empire. Taxation being among the primary reasons. People don't like to get taxed. And so when the communists rose to power, having known that history, because Mao Zedong, with all of his faults, was educated on the history of China, he knew well how things developed politically. They were not so keen on these traditional martial artists spreading decent combative methods that people could actually use to either hurt one another or could potentially be used to hurt members of the Communist Party. And so they sort of clamped on that traditional stream of practice from within Chinese culture and they pushed in two ways. One of which was to sort of make it, as Tomer suggested, inappropriate to practice such things in public, and this was heavily discouraged. So the majority of people who kept the practice would either not show anything combative in public or just practice everything in secret. And then they only started coming out more publicly in the late 80s, early 90s. And then the other side of that was the Chinese Communist Party putting together committees, because the committee is a very communist idea. They do a lot of things by committee. They basically coerced various notable practitioners of traditional martial arts to come up with quote unquote, official forms, communist approved versions of martial arts. And then they came up with the modern wushu practice, which is performance art, like gymnastics. And they came up with sanda, which is competitive practice. Basically, the Chinese Communist Party's answer to Muay Thai. They want to have a Chinese thing which would be like Muay Thai. And the third one was a simplified form of the practice of Tai Chi. And they brought in a committee which created a short form, the famous, or some would say infamous, 24 movement form from the Yang style, which is made up of movements from different variations of the Yang style long forms. And they basically brought, a few people who were masters of Yang style Tai Chi and told them, like, you're gonna just sit together now, pick up a few movements and create a form that would be officially approved. And we're going to use that as essentially health-oriented gymnastics for the general populace, which is what they did. And this is what Tomer was talking about. This is the Tai Chi that became very widespread worldwide, especially among Han communities. And then Chen Ting Hong in Hong Kong, he was teaching Wu style. Wu style is sort of similar externally in many respects to Yang style. And so he was doing this traditional thing, but then came in the fad with the new Yang 24 form, which was kind of similar, but actually not the real thing, the Chinese Communist version of the real thing. So that's sort of the cultural and historical context.
Yeah, and when you go outside of the mainland, where there wasn't that coercion, that pressure to remove the traditional elements from the public sphere, like traditional martial arts, then there was a different type of relationship between the traditional martial arts as they were usually, connected to organized crime and the general population. People would pay protection. Sometimes they wouldn't like it. Sometimes they would, and it wasn't always the relationship to the police was also not one-sided. So someone opening a new business could have a line dance, with a martial arts performance outside the new business, to demonstrate his connection to the local crime organization, and an opportunity for that crime organization to showcase their shiny kung fu weapons and their skill. If in case other kung fu guys are watching, their footwork in the line dance and their group discipline. And it's very likely that a local police chief would be present as well. And it's okay. That's the way things worked, But that public demonstration, that would be a special event, and the public demonstration was a demonstration of force, like a military parade in some dictatorship, where going by with all the missiles and everyone saluting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not something you can just do. You can't just flood all the public parks with old people doing bad kung fu. That's a recipe for trouble, you know. So there was a cultural clash of sorts, and in the background, of course, all the time, a ticking clock of Western interest in all these arts, removing them from their contemporary, cultural place, just wanting moms to send their kids, to some dojo in the U.S. and practice this stuff. There's that too in the background, and eventually everyone capitulates. But there was a brief moment when the clash was between, is this weird pacifist communist exercise for the people each morning, or is this the heritage of those triads, that in ancient history overthrew the dynasties and are still working underground in Hong Kong? And at that moment, the side that Chen Tinghung took was the Tai Chi side. He saw that was his identity. He's a Tai Chi guy, so he's going to be against everyone. He's going to be against all these other styles, and he'll walk around the parks, and when these bullies, kung fu bullies, start to bully the Tai Chi, young 24 Tai Chi instructor, he's going to stand up for him and get into a fist fight, and that's really that's the ethos that a lot of practitioners in my system kind of were indoctrinated into. We do the combative style that's in stark contrast to the more popular styles that are bullshit, that are that can't stand up for themselves. And we have a lot of traditional rivalries, like with Southern White Crane, from those big Macau ring fights, those old videos.
Are you talking about the Huang Shenxiang school?
I'm not sure. I don't know. But it's like in the 50s, they were already, this is that background force of trying to just turn this into a martial art, turn it into combat sports, and the big fights in Southeast Asia were a testing ground where people like Chen Tinghung and other Tai Chi guys and other stylists would act out their feuds, like in one of those WWF matches, right, in the U.S. Then they'd get on stage and then fight it out, and that's a big part of my Tai Chi system. Is Sancho, is Sanda, is the full contact combat sport side of it. I think it influenced some styles. It influenced not only my Tai Chi, that practical Tai Chi, but also some Choi Li Fut lineages. Really had a decade or two deep inside the combat sports scene of Southeast Asia, and and then that affected the styles. So you'll see a lot of applications in my Tai Chi lineage, meaning fighting techniques, right? Where you could grab someone's arm, and in any other style they would, but we do it with a clenched fist, or at least we make a point of remembering you can do it with a clenched fist, because you might want to know how to do it with a boxing glove. So that's an element that I think remained historically inside the style, and especially the kind of fighty attitude, so sometimes it's okay if you don't do the technique perfectly, as long as you can make it work against a resisting opponent, that type of attitude, which it's not always that common,
So
Yeah,
that Dokardi, rest his soul, is your Shigong, right? Your Shifu's teacher.
y-
He studied directly under Chen Tinghong.
yes, so did Dov Weisberger. He also studied in Hong Kong and Chen Hung's school. And when he just couldn't stay there anymore, he had to move back to Israel. Then Cheng Ting Hung kind of sent him to go meet Dan Doherty.
Mhm. Who was a veteran student by that time already.
Yeah, yeah. Dan is one of the older, the first Western students of Cheng Ting Hung.
Yeah, Dan, rest in peace. He died a few years ago, right?
I think like just a year ago, maybe even
Yeah,
not even a year.
yeah, fairly recently. So he was a feisty character, and I think one of the first Tai Chi teachers that I've seen were quite fond on putting gloves on themselves and their students' fists and bringing it in a ring and testing things out almost in something in a combative way, but almost in a somewhat sports-like manner. Would you say?
Yeah, it's combat sport, it's straight combat sports. There's not that much of a clear separation. Maybe you can imagine some MMA school that does self-defense classes once a week, or some kind of mixture like that, because they've got this one leg in combat sports, but not everyone competes. And not everyone cares about that. There's still flailing swords and spears around and doing all the traditional thing. By the way, training, conditioning themselves for fights using traditional methods, internal methods, which I think is really cool and has been done until recently in other places too. That's just what people would do. They knew they're going to have a fight. So they do all their low stances and breath work and iron shirt and all the crazy stuff, and they bring that shit into the ring. I think
Mhm.
that's great. I love it.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that modern athletes are still not familiar with. Just to give you an example, after a few years doing my self and mantis qigong, I realized that my lung intake capacity has increased dramatically. That I could suddenly take a breath very slowly, taking a breath for the length of 2 minutes. And when I was testing out, either students of mine who haven't practiced this or asking around, with some fellow colleagues of mine, like, how long could you take in a breath? And mind you, like I haven't been doing any aerobics. My aerobics is through my martial arts, and I'm neither running or swimming or any of that. I'm not rope jumping. I do a lot of aerobics just through the martial arts, but primarily work on my lungs for qigong. I realized, wow, actually, most people who don't do swimming or running or things like that don't have that lung capacity, and that was all conditioning for my qigong. I didn't even intend because I'm not competing, so I didn't even intend to have it as an auxiliary skill for fighting. It was just a natural byproduct of the training.
Yeah, I lowered my pulse, my resting pulse a lot doing Tai Chi. Also, didn't mean for it. I don't know how it happened, why it happened,
Mm.
but it makes sense. It's like, I mean, obviously, you're doing this calm, like old person type movement. It'll have an effect.
Hmm. So I recall years ago you showed me a set. I can't remember exactly. Was it 15 Neigong exercises that you have in that system? Because
Yeah,
in a lot of
24 Neigong.
24. So in a lot of Tai Chi systems, they either don't have anything that is outside of the forms themselves. So if they have any internal work, they do it within the form, or they might separate an exercise from within the form, but work on it through that. If you have adopted the Zhang, the standing methods that actually originally come from Xingyi, cut the long story short, this was brought into Chen Tai Chi Chuan, to Chen village by Feng Zhiqiang. So Feng Zhiqiang He's a famous Chin Tai Chi master of the last century, but he passed away a number of years ago in the 2000s. He also studied Xingyi. And so he taught what nowadays are called the four tigers of Chen Village, four of the more prominent teachers there when they were teenagers. He taught them some standing skills. And they start teaching that, even though they haven't gotten too deep into it, in my opinion. And then suddenly, within a few years, seeing that they teach it in seminars, hundreds, if not thousands, of other Tai Chi teachers across China and the West also started having people stand in Jianzhuang, imitating what these people were doing. So this is excellent skills, yeah, but they come from outside of traditional Tai Chi. But in the Chenting Hong system, there's a whole method of practicing Neigong with these 24 exercises, which is unique. So the stuff that you showed me some years ago was quite different to things I've seen in other systems. It's very much a thing that is particular to that lineage. So could you tell us a little bit about those exercises?
Yeah. So I think you described it correctly. It is unique to the lineage, and a lot of the skills that the Neigong, Tai Chi Neigong develops um, are the same skills that other Tai Chi stylists develop through their form practice. You know, our form is ugly, but ugly. You know, we move so ungracefully compared to what people are used to seeing. It's not there. You know, the form is just, we see it as just an encyclopedia of combative techniques. That's it. You know, I don't think it necessarily originally was that. I know it's not exactly that for other styles. That's just an approach. That's our Tai Chi approach. You know, it's a way to remember all these different moves, and it's a nice way to pass the time. It's not too boring. You know, compared to standing. Oh my God, standing can be terrible. You know, you go through. You have there's a narrative. You know, you move to here, you move to there, you get through with a thing, and you did your exercise. The Neigong is more. It's eating bitters. You know, it's an hour of horse stance with these little tiny movements with your legs. It's torture. You know, and but that's where it's at. That's what the serious practitioners spend a lot of their time doing. It builds a very strong base. So there are 12 yin and 12 yang exercises. With the yin ones um, looking a bit more like how you'd imagine Qigong, you know, slowly waving your arms, only in a low horse stance. And it just builds a really strong base. It's good exercise. And the 12 young ones are more offensive, fudging, like, you know, something unique about these exercises. And the style itself, I think, is the lack of theory. No one will teach you anything about these exercises, just do them. You know, real old school. When I try to think about where these exercises came from, first of all, I don't know. I know I've been told they came from Chan Tsang Feng or whatever, but I don't really know. But I think there's a lot in common in the approach, the way that the Tai Chi classics were originally chanted during the practice. And the strong element, there's a strong element of like iron body, iron shirt, whatever you want to call it. I think this is the type of stuff that you could find throughout the early 20th century in the countryside. People preparing to be bombed by the Japanese, and you know, with all these incantations and breath work and God knows what else. And I think you could probably find similar stuff in other styles in Hong Kong at the time for that reason. I don't know. And what I'm saying is a bit blasphemous. I hope Let's see, Gong Doherty doesn't come out of his grave and whoop my ass for saying all of this. But yeah, that's kind of what it looks like to me. I'm a skeptic like that, you know?
Yeah, that would make sense. It often happens that there is a seasoned master of the martial arts and he has a friend or two, and they've got goodies themselves. And he says, how about I teach you this, and you give me that. And then he sees the value in what they taught him. He makes some modifications and then integrates this into his system. That's most of Chinese martial arts are MMA. They're mixed martial arts. They're an amalgamation or compilation of different styles that very slowly, gradually were brought together over several generations. So yeah, that often happens. I can see how that could have happened. And would you say these 24 Neigong exercises, is that something that's considered quote unquote a secret in your lineage, or is
Oh,
it?
yeah. Oh, yeah. People have been excommunicated for sharing it in an unauthorized manner, you know? Yeah, you start learning them after you do Baisher. I do it's a ceremony accepting someone as a proper student of the lineage, entering the door. These are practices that are common to many martial art lineages. So after you do that, then you begin learning the Tai Chi Nei Gong. I think what's important to say about practical Tai Chi Chuan is that a lot of people enter the lineage.
Hmm,
It's more than you'd expect, in some other traditional art.
I
It's a
see.
big system, it's popular, and a lot of people learn the Nei Gong.
Hmm.
Not everyone goes on to practice it long term because it sucks, but a lot of people are initiated into it.
So for those who are not familiar amongst the listeners, Baisher is literally respecting the teacher. That's one of the names given to when you bow down to the teacher in a special ceremony and you're accepted by the teacher as a 2D, as a disciple. So you enter special relationships with which, generally speaking, because the terms and conditions vary from lineage to lineage, school to school, but essentially you're adopted into the Gongfu family of the teacher. So now it's not just being a veteran student by just the time spent at the school or by the virtue of your skills or having been tested for your skills. It's also a recognition that, okay, this student now has a special relationship with the school, with the teacher, with the lineage. They have also responsibilities. And due to that special sort of established contract between the parties, then on one hand, the disciple now would treat the teacher more respectfully and take care of them as if they were their own father often, or at least a dignified family member. And on the other hand, the teacher would have to invest, hopefully, more resources into the student and reveal to them a greater portion of the system. And I say hopefully because unfortunately, as Tomer and I know, it is quite common that Chinese and also Western teachers would take in money for that honor, which not all teachers do. Not everybody takes money from the students in order for the student to buy shirt, and then they just enjoy the student, having that reputation. They would enjoy the money they gotten, but the student might not always get what they were hoping for. So that really this type of institution varies dramatically from lineage to lineage, school to school. So I'd like to ask you, Tomer, how long did it take you to buy sure within this lineage? And if there are any special terms or conditions, how did this come about?
So again, we're talking about kind of atypical path to Baisher compared to other traditional arts, including the other one in which I did the Baisher with Shifu Ripsky. I'd say 3 or 4 years, and and it's just a natural progression because um, the the content that you receive as a student, the training methods you receive as a student after the ceremony are so central and missing from the content you have as a, let's call it a customer, type of student who just pays and trains. So you really, the only way is to upgrade your level of dedication. Like you put it, it's basically a sign of dedication, not of skill, not of time spent training, and you have to do that just to progress. The ceremony itself is private, the secret ceremony behind closed doors. It involves
No witnesses.
no.
Yeah, that's interesting because, for instance, in other schools and lineages, they would actually want to have witnesses so someone
Yes,
could
yes.
testify.
So I'd say, first of all, that in general, this type of ceremony really sits at the nexus between personal fighting prowess, which, because you gain better access to the instruction through this ceremony, then that's your path to becoming a master, right? You need that for yourself to be able to fight better. But on the other hand, it really shows how important being part of an organization, if you go back to Southeast Asia and I don't know, the 60s, the 70s, the 50s, how important it is to have that group, to have blood brothers, that may be better at Kung Fu, maybe not as good as Kung Fu, but you need a group of them and you need them to be really dedicated to each other, to work as a group, So I think that's really at the heart of these ceremonies that have probably been going on for centuries, secret organizations in the mainland.
Yeah, if we think of
Yeah.
the famous book Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which describes a period from, nearly 2,000 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. You're talking about like the 4th century, something like that. Then already back then, it was quite established to have these types of Baisher-like ceremonies where people either take up fealty to serve under somebody, or they take an oath to be blood brothers. So this is a very, very old tradition in Chinese culture. Tomer, I lost you for a moment.
Uh, there's something unique in the practical Tai Chi and the amount of people who actually go through the ceremony, and yeah, and like you said, the fact that there are no witnesses when you do it, it has a different type of significance. It has a
Okay.
different type of significance. You don't see too many people with that traditional photo, by their teacher, trying to attest to the fact that they are 2D. You don't see that as much.
Can you tell us a little bit about what is in the ceremony, how it looked like?
Yeah, you burn incense and bow both to the teacher teaching you and to a photo, or I mean, like a painting or statue of Chen Feng. Basically, you're entering the cult of Chen Feng, the mythic founder of Tai Chi. Probably not historically, You bring fruit to Chen Feng, and you bring money in a red envelope. So money. I'll just say about that because it immediately sounds corruptive, but with all the people who actually do Baisher into practical Tai Chi Chuan, I don't think anyone's really. That's not really helping anyone make a living. It's not like that. It's just you bring fruit, you bring incense, and you bring money. That's the way it works. and that's Chinese culture.
Yeah, basically you're implying the teacher is not going to buy himself a new car with what's in that envelope.
No, it's just he's giving you something. At the end, it's not balanced. Okay, yeah, you're swearing an oath, and you swear an oath, and there's also a what do you call those wu de type
Etiquette, yeah,
list of
martial etiquette,
yeah
martial virtues.
yeah there's a written martial etiquette that you swear by, but with all of that, it's still not considered officially as if you're giving something to the teacher that compares to what he is giving to you. Okay, that's the traditional mindset, is that he's giving you something enormous, and you can bring the fruit, you can bring the envelope with the money, but you're still he's doing a favor to you. In reality, today, as a martial arts instructor, I know that today, as a teacher, I know that how valuable a dedicated student is, and that though it's still the ceremony is still framed as if the teacher is doing a huge service to the student, doing him a favor and letting him into the prestigious lineage with all the secrets, and allowing him to become a kung fu master, or perhaps even thinking of it as becoming part of this secret kung fu clan that presumably benefits him in some way. The reality is that nobody wants to learn kung fu the old way. It's difficult finding good students, and any instructor would feel privileged to have someone really into it to the degree that they want to undergo this type of ceremony and dedicate themselves to the practice of whatever that teacher is teaching them for the long term. That's that's a gift for the teacher.
I know that.
So there's something a bit disingenuous in the traditional framing, at least nowadays.
Or people perceive it to be disingenuous. Perhaps people have become somewhat more cynical of the experience.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a realistic type of guy. I can see that these arts are having a hard time. I know there's no more kung fu fad. I know kung fu's pretty low on the list of most people want to study martial arts today. Just being realistic. So yeah.
That would be a combination of various factors. We have the culture shifting in specific directions with so many people going online. The martial arts themselves, many instructors go online to keep their businesses alive, and that is one approach. There's also the cultural shift to a sort of a lifestyle with which you're kept busy at all times. I think if you go back to the olden times, generally speaking, throughout most of human history, certainly still in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s of the previous century, people still had a lot of free time on their hands. If they didn't have to work more than one full-time job, they did have quite a bit of free time, especially the men. Unfortunately, because that is how society was structured, men did not typically, do the laundry and wash the dishes. So the men and young men in particular sought to fill in that, to occupy that space of free time within their schedule with something to build their bodies and characters. And that was considered valuable. Nowadays, if you have even a little bit of free time, then there's Netflix. And that Netflix is considered something valuable to fill in your free time with. And then people would tell themselves and would tell others, like, I don't feel that my week was complete without me having watched something that I like. It's as if the the big companies have hypnotized people uh, into the belief that they have to compensate themselves for the hardships of life with leisure and pleasure, and especially those related to either watching or eating things. And so people believe that if they were to skip that sort of leisure and pleasure and invest their time in something that is also arduous, it's not work, it's a hobby, or could be a profession, it's something they like, but it's nonetheless arduous, and they've already been at something that is difficult for them doing their typical line of work, then they're not so readily accepting of it because they don't see it as quote unquote proper compensation for their efforts. That's not the leisure and pleasure they've been hypnotized to look for, you know? So I think that's a part of what we're looking at right now. Also, it has to do, of course, with public relations. And Chinese martial arts have had real problem in that department, especially in recent times, with this whole Xu Xiaodong phenomenon, who is this fellow, which we mentioned on the podcast before, who went around China. He's an MMA coach and also was a competitor for a while. And he went and beat up all sorts of phonies calling themselves traditional martial arts masters. You know, anybody who's got eyes in their skull can tell. You know, these people knew next to nothing about traditional martial arts. Nonetheless, they're beaten up, and because they're claimed to be traditional martial arts masters, then Su Xiaodong got a lot of positive reputation for beating up the phonies, and the traditional Chinese martial arts got a bad rep as a result as well. That's a long story, and rather than get into that, it's also covered in other episodes. Let's talk about what made you transition from, or rather add on your Tai Chi experience with other martial arts under Master Ripsky, and how do you even find that guy?
Uh, Found them just on YouTube, I guess.
Hmm.
But I was looking. I knew I wanted to add something. I understood that what I was studying was the tip of the iceberg, that this is a giant world of Chinese martial arts. And I say Chinese, I mean, I'm talking about Chinese martial arts because it's like a collection of outlooks on combat and movement, and once you start getting a taste for what's out there, um, at least I went through a phase where I just wanted it all,
Like
like
a kid in a candy shop, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, but
Oh yeah, yeah. I have.
you kind of seem like the kind of guy who did.
I tell you the truth. Like when I go on YouTube, I still experience it to this day. On one hand, I'm very content with what I have and what I'm studying and what I teach. On the other hand, although they're rather more difficult to find nowadays, there's still so many great teachers out there who do all sorts of really interesting, fascinating things that you and I haven't studied. And suddenly we got access. We can see those things on video. It's so very
Yeah,
enticing.
yeah, yeah. And the thing is that we can see them, but we can't really learn them through video very easily. We can appreciate them, which I
Hmm.
think not everyone can. You have to really be into kung fu to see something and say, "Wow, I've never seen that before. It's weird, but that guy's amazing." Uh, so yeah, so that was kind of the mindset, and I was thinking, what's missing? I mean, tai Chi is such a specific thing. It's so focused. It's also there's a level of abstraction there. So it's really these abstract principles of movement, of contact, of collision with the enemy, and less about specific techniques. So it's really very focused on these specific ideas, and these ideas rule out a lot of other stuff that exists in combat, like I understood it at the time. So what if I want to do a flying knee? I want to throw a flying knee in someone's face. That's a legitimate technique, isn't it? I mean, you can do that. You can throw a flying knee in someone's face. It'll mess them up. How do you do
Tell
that
you
in Tai
what,
Chi?
I've never seen a Tai Chi practitioner fish hook someone's nostril to take them to the ground. It's like they're
So
not. It's not nasty like that. You know, Tai Chi people don't think nasty visually.
no, but that technically makes more sense. You know, you make contact and you apply force with strong base, right? Just like just like most kung fu guys would. Most, like, let's say, kung fu guys from the more developed styles. You know, that's the way things work. But there's so much that didn't exist. So what if you fall to the ground? How do you even get up? Is there a way
Mhm.
to get up? You can't even get up with good Tai Chi. You know, basically, if you're doing good Tai Chi, you're limited in what you're doing. You're limited to the most common stuff that should be said. Basically, standing toe to toe with someone and wrestling them and striking them. You know, but I was interested in, okay, how do I take this type of approach of trying to distill things down to principles, like Kung Fu does, trying to make things coherent, using these principles and applying them to a wide range of techniques. You know, this is something that Kung Fu people do. Everybody does it. There are a lot of profound ideas in Western boxing or in anything, but that's not. There's a lot more weight put on the understanding side of things in Kung Fu, and I was looking for that, just widening the technical repertoire, you know.
Mhm.
And then I saw Neil, who could do Tai Chi way better than I could, but he could also do acrobatic stuff, and he could fall to the ground and get back up. And that's when I really started to think about Neil's Drunken, because the Drunken really does have so much in common, actually, with Tai Chi specifically, not just with what you'd call, I don't know, orthodox martial arts, but with Tai Chi specifically being soft, um, trying to wham out these fudging type attacks, you know. So that's a lot already. That's a lot in common, but it also has this ditang, tradition of falling, maybe just a little bit fighting on the ground, not to the level of expertise that people know how to do it today, but there's something there, you know. Yeah, so that attracted me, and I eventually flew over to Western Canada to train with him, with my wife pregnant
Yeah, that's
and
what I was
everything.
gonna. That's exactly what I was going to ask. Like, were you married then? So you said you were already
I
married,
was
and
married, yeah, but I set such a low standard to begin with because my wife knew I was crazy to begin with. So her approach was like, okay, this is his last chance, whatever, just come back fast and let's not talk about this ever again.
no.
Yeah.
But how? Okay, okay, but you gotta help some listeners here because a lot of men could not convince their wives to even attend their martial arts school, like a 10-minute drive from their house 3 times a week, let alone drag their pregnant wife across the world to the other side of the globe so you could
Oh
practice
no,
martial
I
arts.
left her. Yeah, I left her in Israel when I did that. But
Oh,
yeah, which maybe emphasizes the point even more. But listen, I'm not. It's a good thing that most wives won't let their husbands do this, in my opinion. I think most wives expect their husbands to grow up way faster than I did. And I listen. I know everyone. There's this military ethos in Israel. Everyone enlists. No, but I was crazy. I was really uh, like really deep into this world of combatives and of martial arts. Not always in the most functional ways. It's not like I established this giant chain of schools and was making lots of money. Um, I was kind of messed up from my military experiences, and I don't know. I guess in a different context, it suddenly looks like a good idea. Like, yeah, why not? Maybe that'll sort things out. Go to fucking Canada. I'll see you in a few months.
Well, was there something specific you were looking to sort out? Like if we go a little bit beyond the martial arts, something you were looking for?
I was looking, and something that I really found in the martial arts, and especially in the Chinese martial arts, maybe to sublimate violence. The, our culture is so unique. There's just no place for violence at all. You know, my kids don't grow up slaughtering goats every few months or killing chickens or even fighting at school. You know, that's a rare occurrence. Like a kid has a fight in school. Wow, something happened. He'll tell me
Which
about it. We'll
is
talk about it.
that's unusual. I mean, when you and I were growing up, fights were an everyday occurrence.
I was bullied a lot in school. There was a lot more violence, but things have changed. And I bet you talk to people from other parts of the world, like there was a lot of immigration from Eastern Europe. You talk to those guys about being bullied for being Jews or whatever before they immigrated to Israel. They saw worse violence than I saw when I was in school. So things that's a trend. That's a direction of things. There's not much room for violence in our lives, and if you get too deep into it, that becomes a problem with your just day-to-day functioning because you don't have too much space for that side of your personality. So that puts you in a conundrum. So what do? You shut out an entire side of yourself that maybe a side you've actually invested in. So I was a professional, but what do I do with that?
Mhm.
Um,
It's like a
so I'm not
pilot.
saying
It's
what's
it's like
that?
it's like in Israel they forced the fighter pilots to retire at I think at 50, and then what do they do? Like if they're not going to fight, if they're not going to fly commercial planes, what do you do with 30 years of 32 years of flying fighter jets? One day it's just gone. That's a big problem psychologically. It's difficult. And yeah, Tomer is saying, I was a warrior, I was a fighter. How do I keep on carrying on that sort of um, identity, carrying with this identity whilst not actually fighting for the IDF or the Amam or the First Division?
How do I engage with this type of content, which I can't really help myself from doing, but doing it in a way that doesn't um, develop, how can I say? Um, Basically, I'm thinking about Tai Chi push hands when I'm talking to you right now. Tai Chi push hands is competitive. You're trying to unbalance your opponent. He's trying to unbalance you. Um, Pushing, pulling, depending on the style, they might mix in some strikes, joint locks, stuff like that. And the whole game is geared around your how stable you are, how internally stable you are, uh, how much you can tone down your aggressiveness and the physical expression of your aggressiveness tight muscles, make for easy levers to grab onto you and pull you off balance. So it's an environment in which you use aggression to therapeutically, really, and it makes you better at what you do, but it also guards you against a lot of side effects of being too engaged with violence.
I think that's a brilliant bringing together of two words, therapeutic aggression. I think this is not commonly stated nowadays, but therapeutic aggression is actually a big part of what we do in martial arts.
Yeah, definitely.
And Tomer was saying, our society is not as violent nowadays. It's actually true in certain respects, but not as much in others, because yes, it's true we're not physically killing, most of us are not physically killing animals with our hands, and we do not have to fight to protect our village, etc. On the other hand, Israeli society is quite violent in other ways. There is a facet to Israeli culture and society with which we are all one people and we support one another. And in a time of dire circumstances and great distress, like a war, we all come together and support each other. However, in everyday life, that pressure is taken on one another on the streets. And while people are not as keen and quick to go into physical altercations as they are oftentimes in North America, they do yell and curse and shout. They can push each other in all sorts of ways, physical and psychological. It's an extremely aggressive society, and people are desperately in need in this country for therapeutic aggression, because the way in which they express aggression in everyday life is hazardous to one's health, really. I mean, here, for example, here in Israel, if you arrive at an institution, like a school, a university, a company, whatever, or if you're speaking with an institution on the phone, say you're in need of customer service or whatnot, if you're not aggressive, chances are you're not going to get ahead with what you deserve or what you need. You actually have to demonstrate a certain level of aggression at some point, else people wouldn't count you, or otherwise I'd say people would see you as a pushover, which is a problem we have here in Israeli society. It's very particular to this country, and it's actually the mirror opposite of what you see in Canada. In Canada, if you're not polite enough, you often would not get served well. In Israel, if you're not aggressive enough, you often would not get what you want.
Yeah, well put. That is an important peculiarity of Israeli society. It's true.
Yeah. So you get to Master Neil, and then what? So you practice with him. He has this full-time sort of modality for practice. So unlike a lot of teachers who have a school and they teach classes, and occasionally for some years you do that, but he also takes people in, for everyday training, several hours a day, one-on-one, or in small groups for prolonged periods of time, to sort of imbue them, sort of dip them, like you'd deep fry something, dip them in the art, in the culture, right?
Yeah, that's what I did. I did full time with at any given time. He's always got someone around doing full time. Sometimes he'll have a bunch of people, I don't know, 5 or more. Sometimes just 1 or 2 people coming from all over the world. He also usually lives in these small communities. It's really strange. It seems strange to me, like you've got these foreigners coming from the other to visit Neil, and his neighbors don't even know who he is. It's just a small time community. Yeah, and I train. I don't know, I guess like 7, 8 hours a day.
Wow, seven, eight
Yeah,
hours a day. That's very intense.
yeah, because you have the morning training, then a bit more in the afternoon, and then classes start. I just local because he was a local kung fu instructor in BC where I visited him. So I just go to class too, along with all the local guys. So you really you get a lot of training done and a lot of close supervision, and it's a great setup. It
Mm.
really is.
So,
And
so,
but
so sorry. Yeah, speak up.
so I trained. I came there to train Drunken. Um, it's also when you're in that kind of situation, the really your best bet is to cram down as much info as you can, despite not being able to demonstrate it at a decent level at all, because you'll be flying away soon and you don't know when the next time you're going to see your instructor is. So just I really crammed down as much as I could from the Drunken system, which is huge, and as well as his 18 Lohan system and his Bagua, which really turned in. I mean, that's what I'm doing now. I'm doing mostly Bagua these days, and uh, and I brought it back to Israel and just started training. With any videos that I filmed or my notebooks and corresponding with him and just training alone, and until I started bringing him over. So that I could spend more time with him one on one, and just a lot cheaper than flying out there, So we bring him over,
Mm.
and that's what we've been doing, training in Europe or in Israel.
So how was Master Neil as compared with Shifu Weisberger, for example, as teachers, as people?
Well, I'd say first of all, as martial artists, Dov, like most people in practical Tai Chi Chuan community, they train only that style, that one style. Um, they attend seminars for that one style, and yeah, sure, everyone watches YouTube, but basically it's like when you only do one style, all your energy, all your curiosity is channeled to the forms you have, to we have also written classics in Tai Chi, so everything's about that. And Neil is very eclectic, very, very eclectic. He studies everything. This is all he does basically too. So he travels around. When he was younger, he could spend years with teachers, picking up the styles. Now maybe spends less time. Maybe he needs less time too.
Mhm.
And he's always changing. If you studied with Neil 5 years ago and you meet him now, you'd have to remind him what you were doing. Just so much. He's always changing, always developing. So it's a different mindset. Um,
What one could say that this is a sort of person who actually, some would call it, he married the art, but even more appropriately, you could say he sacrificed his life for art. This is really who he is, what he does 24 hours a day. He's even more added than both of us maniacs. And he's the real deal, like the ancient masters. Like that's the only thing that he does.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he definitely is like that. Dov is as well, but Dov wakes up in the morning, he's like I don't know, 75, pushing 80. He gets up in the morning and does like an hour and a half of Neigong and a low horse stance that no one could keep up with him. I mean, I
Mm.
could never keep up with him. And he does the same fucking thing every day for years, for decades, decades. When was he in Hong Kong? God knows when he was in Hong Kong, the 80s, I don't know. And then, but that, it doesn't stop there, you know, and he'll do the weight exercises from within the system, and he'll do the form practice with the weapons. It's old school, you know, it's old school. The way Neil sees Kung Fu is not normal, like that's not traditional. It's not traditional. Okay, he's looking for the essence of styles. He's looking for the bottom line. He'll change things up if he thinks he can do better. That's blasphemous, you know. I think I can do better. This part is not really developed. I think I don't know. Maybe this exercise could augment it. You can't do that in Kung Fu, but Neil does it. He does it very well, you know. And he knows what being good is, what being skilled is, and that's all he cares about. So you could say that's the essence of the traditional approach, but you see, that's Neil. He goes for the essence, and he won't let other things, hinder that. He's just going for his skill. He's developing his skill, deeper skill all the time.
So, in your own teaching here in Israel, which approach have you taken? How do you practice and teach?
More like Neil, and yeah, but basically, it's taken me years to get here, and I'm still. It's not complete, but it's more and more becoming my own standards, my own understanding, and yeah, I learned the traditional way many times, and I can appreciate that. I can appreciate trying to live up to the standard that your teacher presents to you. And that's what I do. I present a standard, and my students need to live up to that standard. But I choose the standard that I present to them. So I teach traditional form, but I have my own goals that I set for my students inside that form. What will make that form correct?
For example,
I do a Bagua Zhang, and I'm really invested in the connection between Bagua form, as in, you know, movement, external movement, and internal principles. I think that some styles of Bagua Zhang do a very good job connecting external form and internal principles. Not all internal styles try to do that, you know, but I think Bagua does, and that's what I'm looking for. I want my students to be able to show me what they think, you know, how they think their movement, and that's what I work with.
to show you how they think their movement. Could you dig deeper into that?
So, to me, internal martial arts is subjective. You know, it means like how the martial artist experiences whatever it is he's doing. So you can often see a pretty strong clash between what a teacher tells you should be doing, you should be intending your body to do, and what he expects, the results he expects from you. For instance, in Tai Chi, you're told to be soft, super soft as you can be. And yet you're expected to like punch people, push them away, take them down. They experience you as being hard. And bring any scientist in, and he'll experience you as being hard too. It doesn't matter what he hooks up to you, he'll see that muscle tension. Yeah. So he'll see you not crumbling under pressure. He'll see your body being rigid. You know, you say the word rigid to a Tai Chi practitioner, he gets he gets shivers. You know, that's like a terrible thing to say.
He becomes rigid
And
about it.
he becomes rigid about it. Yeah, that's a mechanical term, and it's true. Yeah, you need to be fucking rigid. You know, but on the other hand, um, you know, my Tai Chi instructor will tell me to be soft, and he does it better than me. I ask him, how do you do it so well? I say, well, I'm softer than you. You know, he's not lying. He's just talking about what he's doing to his body from the inside out, how he's intending his body to move. He's telling his body, be soft, be relaxed. So that's the internal side, and you see a clash there. You're not really um, expressing outwardly, externally, the internal process. You see the same thing with the approach to form in general, like with standing exercises in Shingi Chuan. Yeah, so you do all this internal work while you're basically not moving at all, and that's a pretty powerful message that doesn't really matter how you move. I remember once I met you, I asked you, can you do a Pichuen with a Palchuen form? You said sure, and you did it.
Hmm.
I
I,
remember that.
I don't
But
even
that's
remember that. Yeah,
so
but it makes sense. Yes,
it makes sense though, right? I mean, the form is contingent. Yeah, we had this cool idea. You can grab a guy here and do this and do that. But if you do that, that won't make you a good Tai Chi practitioner. I don't care what technique you do. Being a good Tai Chi practitioner is about the internal principles behind your movement. And if you happen to have a different form, different fighting techniques, or an actual fight put you in a position where you had no choice but to do something that's not in your form, that won't make you a bad Tai Chi practitioner. You know, just make you a good fighter. So there's a disconnect between internal and external in internal martial arts, and also looking down upon form. And there's sayings like, you know, if you just do form, then you won't get shit out of it when you're old, right? You need to practice the internal stuff, right? The gong, not just the fa. So I think Bagua is different in that. I think it's because it has a different heritage. Um, uh, like a northern fist, long fist, whatever you call it, heritage, where this disconnect isn't nearly as prominent, where you learn how to move your body, and your form is the benchmark for your internal skill. And I think that's what Bagua does. It distills control of form, control of movement, distills that, and you need to be able to demonstrate that you can move according to internal principles, specific internal principles. You need to show it, and that's what I do with my students. That's not what most Bagua people do with their students. So that's to your question, you know. But that's what I do. I just I've learned to feel comfortable with that. That's good for me. That's good pedagogy, I think. I can bring out the best of my students that way. And they can go meet other Bagua guys and do the same moves with the same picturesque names and probably the same fighting techniques, you know, but that's just where I am.
Hmm. I see. Yeah. Well, when I speak with my friend Master Yang Hai, he says that the unique characteristic of Bagua Zhang is that it brought to the table of martial arts culture a, a truly unique and novel approach to training and fighting, which has not been tried before. And that is a very difficult thing to come up with, as over centuries, people have tried nearly everything. But potentially, because of that Taoist lineage tradition, that idea of walking the circle and working with the eight trigrams they've been able to come up with an approach that really is new. Therefore, I think if we were to consider Bagua Zhang, it is always a martial art which essentially attempts to ask the question, how do you express 8 different ideas in transition between one another? These 8 different ideas, we could draw them as the 8 trigrams. We can give them names, but they're just ideas. The ideas about transitions in nature. Now, the 5 phases, often called the 5 elements, are about the relationships between 5 phenomena, say 5 seasons, 5 colors, 5 smells, 5 planets, etc., etc. The 8 trigrams are not as much a phenomena, but rather the feeling of transitioning between one thing to another. What does it feel like, for instance, for a cake dough to become a cake? Like the transition between the two. What does it feel like when ice melts and becomes water, which is the reverse from solid to liquid, etc., etc. So I think Bagua always explores that narrative, and if we were to greatly oversimplify and put this in a very broad perspective, all lineages and styles of Bagua essentially are attempting to explore how can one walk in a circle, and from within the circle, which is the complete, right? The circle is the complete cycle of yin and yang. From that cycle of yin and yang, which is just two, how do we transition from the 2 to the 8, which is the 2 in the power of 3? And there's also the in between. The 2 times 2 is 4, so 2 in the power of 2, and then 2 in the power of 3. And then from the 8 to 64, which is 2 in the power of 4. It's not only a quantum leap in how you think about martial arts, it actually, in my opinion, related to quantum physics. So 5 elements, 5 phases is very Newtonian in its thinking, and the 8 trigrams are quantum-like. It's as in quantum mechanics, you have the notion of you can have several things existing simultaneously, several situations that are possible. And I think this idea, again, generally, broadly speaking, applies to Bagua as a martial art. Perhaps, Tomer, you could put in your own words for better perspective for listeners.
Well, I think it's important to recognize that Bagua, unlike Xingyichuan, unlike Tai Chi, when you just look at it as a martial art, what people are doing, what people are teaching, what people are learning, what people are practicing, it is so much more diverse. And yeah, there are like traditional explanations of why that might be the case, but it doesn't even matter. It's just so diverse. It's really difficult to. It makes it difficult to talk about the art generally, you know. So I've learned. I've cross-trained in a few different styles of Bagua. They all walk the circle, right? Some styles try to apply the stepping from within the circle walking. Basically, they're telling you fight like that, right? Use that stepping to fight. And other very respectable styles kind of see circle walking as a training method, and then use stepping methods that most kung fu guys will probably recognize, you know, like zigzagging and leaning forward, etc. that's really different. It's not the same art, you know. That's not like saying, "Oh, my form looks like this, your form looks a bit like that." No, it means that looking from the outside, you have two arts where people are walking in circles, but they're doing completely different things. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'll find one where they're trying to build cardiovascular endurance by running in a circle. I just thought they were doing the same thing I'm doing, you know. But it's just these are superficial similarities, but really the arts are very different from each other. I
I
think a lot.
see commonly different lineages. They would have the same posture, but
Yeah,
one
they
thing.
all have the same palm change. Yeah, the first palm change, almost all of them, right?
Oh, what I meant to say though is they might have the same posture, say hands at the level with the chest, with the palms pushing out, and one teacher would say, "Oh, that's the trigram for mountain," and the other guy would say, "No, no, that's the trigram for water," and they would use it in a
Yeah,
totally different way.
yeah. Also, they all really wanted to have these 8 or 64 or whatever concepts or postures or techniques or but they all do different ones. I see it as very um, talented, well-informed practitioners, probably with very good teachers, um, but a weak connection between them. You know, the more you go one more generation back, another generation back, not too many generations to go back in this art, and yeah, they all historically trained with the same guys in the same place, but they're not doing the same thing. They're not doing,
Mhm.
except for you, like I think the some important core commonalities are the whole business of Zhang, of the drilling palm,
Mhm.
similar to Shingi Chuan, because there you start to see a dynamic that's a bit more like what I'm used to seeing in Tai Chi, where people say, yeah, the Chen guys show the principles in their movements. They externalize our movement principles, but the young guys will say, we do the same thing. We just don't show you.
Mhm.
We have we have less movement. Our form is less important, I guess, basically. But we still have those same internally spiraling motions. That you can see that in Bagua as well, where everyone is talking about the same internal principles, maybe not the same level of understanding, but everyone's discussing the same stuff, but not everyone's showing it. You know, not everyone's really twisting their body into that swan. You know,
Mhm.
so I think that's really where it's at, um, and I think it echoes internal training and body mechanics of Northern Fist. I know there are traditions that emphasize there's a lot of Chinese wrestling imbued into Bagua. So, notwithstanding that, I think that the more influential internal principles and I guess also application come just from other kung fu, common kung fu, you know, that was around that all these old masters trained in.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes sense. You see a lot of Shaolin in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, a
yeah,
lot of
call it
Shaolin monks.
Shaolin. Yeah, exactly. I mean, all this twisting, drilling, whatever, that's just what they do, you know? That's just what it is.
Mhm. Well, Tomer, I gotta tell you, this has been a most incredible interview, and I'm very happy that you came on the show today to share from your breadth of life experience. It's a lot of years in the martial arts and a lot of styles and various teachers that you studied under. And of course, Tomer is continuing on his journey and his research. We'd probably have him again sometime in the future to hear more from his very unique and eclectic perspective. Tomer, if people would like to come study under you, where do you teach nowadays?
So I teach in Israel, in Jerusalem. Just a small group of guys and girls. So I don't teach online. I don't typically outreach to people far away, or I'm just small time. But whoever wants to is welcome to contact me. My email is TBenJohanan. So that's T Ben-Johanan @gmail.com. Very informal. If you heard something that interested you, if you want to say something, ask something, just feel free to email me. Yeah.
Hey, you heard the man. Good Gongfu teachers are not easy to come by, and you have one in Jerusalem if you're interested. And I gotta tell you, he's got the skills. I know, I felt it hands-on, and definitely not just the skills, but also the wits to go about it and the breadth of experience. So he's worth your time. Thank you so very much, Tomer, for being with us today. And hopefully,
Jonathan, thanks a lot for having me on. It's a pleasure. I like to talk shop, and I haven't spoken to you for a while. Yeah, so it's been fun.
yeah, definitely. So we'd have it again. We should meet sometime soon. In the meanwhile, listeners,
Definitely.
thank you for being with us for such a lengthy and also deep and interesting interview. More are coming. Stay tuned. Have a great day, everybody.